So what happens if you reach out on Twitter to find a bunch of talented individuals to create a new project? Something incredible that everyone's been talking about this last few months. I'm here to talk about it. Uncaged Anthology V.1. Hi Game Masters, and welcome back to Second Rate DMs. My name is Scott, and today we're going to talk about Uncaged Anthology V.1, a 5th edition supplement that goes from pretty much 1 to 20 and everywhere in between, basically your 4 tiers of play if you have it. If this is your first time here at Second Rate DMs, we cover news, reviews, and pretty much anything and everything tabletop role-playing game. So let's jump right into it. So Uncaged Anthology was this project that was put together about a year ago or so when an individual got a hold on Twitter and said, hey, I'm wanting to do this project, I need some help. And what happened is there's over 100 different individuals, well actually I'm sure there's a lot more that answer the call, but 100 different individuals have come together to create this anthology. And the trope, so to speak, of this Uncaged is actually the opposite of that, right? To break all the tropes. And so specifically, it focuses on, mythological creatures such as Medusas and hags and your typical things that you will find in the Dungeons & Dragons, the fantasy world that, you know what a Medusa is going to do. It's an evil thing. You walk up to it. It's going to try to turn you to stone, and, you're just going to stand there and maybe reflect it with your shield, or you're just going to turn to stone, and then you've got to figure out, like, oh, God, we got to find some soft or whatever it is that you got to do to get rid of those things. So their goal of this project was to put together this whole anthology that subverted those tropes, that made things a little bit different than your average encounter. And I will say, and I'm happy to say, that they have done a phenomenal job with this. So there are over 23 different adventures in this book. And again, like I said, they range across all 4 tiers of play. If you don't know what that is for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, just take a look. It's in the book somewhere. But basically, it's just the power levels for the games. Long story short, you buy this book or the PDF or whichever you prefer, you're going to get something that's going to last you throughout the entire point of play. And essentially, you're getting a bunch of different types of quests. You're not just getting combat quests. You're not just getting puzzles. Each writer is very obvious that this is put together as an anthology because each writer has their own style and their own vision for what how they took the writing prompt, so to speak. And then they put together their own stories. And they are phenomenal stories. I will say that if your players are typically murder hobos, this will do one of 2 things. Either they will fail miserably or they will learn their lesson, one or the other. So I really love Sphinxes and their aptitude for puzzles. It's absolutely one of my favorite things, and I would say that the chapter, and I want to say they're level 17 or 18, somewhere around there, higher tier, it is one big solid puzzle, and I love it. I don't want to give away too much when it comes to the storylines or anything like that, because the pleasure really of reading this anthology is how these stories are written. They're masterfully written. There are a couple things that I'll talk about here in a few minutes, little small complaints that I had, but we'll get to that in a second. So one of the things that they really do well, and it's interesting I've not seen before, is at the beginning of every single one of these adventures is kind of like this, content warning, right? And so what they do is if you're running for a bunch of new players, or if you're running for players that you know them really well maybe, and you see something that has to do with domestic violence, right? Or abuse, and you can read through here and say, oh, I probably shouldn't use this one, for this particular person. Or there's a forest fire one. I know that that may seem silly to some folks, but a lot of folks, they live on the West Coast where they deal with forest fires and they've lost everything. And so maybe they don't want to run an adventure that has to do with forest fires or have to deal necessarily with that content. It might make them feel uncomfortable. And I know that some GMs aren't really going to care. Some of them actually will probably write this product off completely because it includes this. And that's really unfortunate. I find it, especially as someone who runs a lot of things at stores and at cons, that I like to have these kinds of warnings. So let me know what boundaries I may be crossing here. Because when I write something, it's just, it is what it is. And, I won't know that I stepped on somebody's toes unless they come out and say, hey, you said this and it was really uncomfortable. So I'll say something else. The art in this book is absolutely unparalleled. I understand that probably for cost reasons, there's not a whole lot of art, but there is 1 or 2 pieces per adventure, and they are absolutely stunning. And of course, they're probably scrolling back here right now, but they are phenomenal pieces of artwork. I will say that if you're looking for something a little bit more meaty or in-depth, this probably isn't your shtick, right? So these run a lot more, they're more like encounters or one-shots, if you will. Actually, I've said this before, one of my favorite books was this book called Dungeon Delve Back and Forth Edition, that essentially it was just a book of adventures, really short adventures. And that's essentially what this is. This is a book of short adventures, mostly I would say for one-shots or maybe seeding into your campaigns, but you're not gonna have, this is not a campaign book. This is something that you buy, something you add to your collection to throw in on occasion to kind of subvert, those ideas, subvert those tropes. I would warn against overusing it, or else then it's no longer, a trope. If they always expect the bad guy is going to be a good guy, or a neutral guy, or maybe we should talk to them, or whatever it may be, then it's no longer a surprise. It doesn't give the same effect that they're going to have the first few times. And there were a couple things that I did not like about this book, and only two really. The first one is, I don't want to call it formatting per se, but it's definitely the arrangement of each one of the quests. What I mean by that is that there's some adventures that say, okay, you're going to meet these NPCs at this time, and there's some adventure, and there's some that don't. And then there's some adventures that have this nice treasure table at the end. If they have done X, Y, and Z, they would have received X, Y, and Z, which I absolutely prefer, by the way, as someone who runs games, because players are not going to run just Z. They're going to try X or Y too. So having those options of what could have happened, where they could have succeeded or failed, I like seeing that kind of stuff. And so because I don't think when the writing prompts were sent out, maybe, that it was so clear on, hey, here's your writing prompt, plus we want your trigger warnings, we want your treasure, we want X amount of endings, we want your NPC list, and whatever else, right? And so some of them are different styles, so to speak. The only other thing slightly negative that I have to say about this is that the book is so not geared towards combat really and skills per se. It's much more role play and story thick. And so with that, I felt like they could have released either a system neutral version or perhaps had somebody on their staff create a 3.5 Pathfinder whatever version to kind of help out with some of the other things. I think that by not including that they may have shut themselves off from a community that I think honestly probably would have eaten it up. The folks that tend to stick to those tropes are the guys that have played for 10, 20, 30 years that are still playing, third edition, still playing Pathfinder. And so a book like that, or at least have the option thereof to have different stat blocks, maybe a different PDF that you could purchase, would be wonderful, and I think it would really open up the market for them. And to be honest, it's not a lot more work than what they've already put in. So I really hope, I know they're working on an anthology volume 2, so I'm really hoping that in the second one, and maybe if you guys are listening, go ahead and throw in another book that has those Pathfinder stats. And although I would wait maybe until after second edition Pathfinder, maybe, I don't know, and just to see what happens. But it could easily be a system neutral book. So that's it, guys. That's Uncaged Anthology Volume 1, and I want to say that it is a wonderful, wonderful product and definitely worth your purchase. I believe it's $14.99 on the Dungeon Guild Master thing that, and I'll put the link down there, that Wizards puts out. But I'll also say that it would be worth for you, even if you don't play 5th edition, to go ahead and snag this up to use for your own stories. It doesn't take much to change. I mean, there's really not a lot of combat in there, so it doesn't take much to change out the combat blocks and stat blocks. If they're fighting a hag, they're fighting hags. Hags are hags. The only difference is what they do in 5th edition versus what they do in Pathfinder. And so I definitely believe that this book is worth picking up, even if you're outside of that 5th edition tag. You can also buy a hardback version for about $40 and some change, and all that is, again, there on the site. So they are putting out a second one, like I mentioned before, and I really can't wait to see it. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for coming by. I hope that you guys find this review useful and that you'll be able to add this book to your collection and some of the other ones that we talk about. Join us next week when we continue to do our review series. I think this is pretty much where we're going to live from now on. I like the reviews. I really like getting into this stuff, and I think it really helps you guys out there. I know a lot of times when I look for products, I can't find what I'm looking for. So to hell with it, I'll do it. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for coming. And as always, because you know, we have to keep the lights on, right? Got to hit those likes and those subscribes. And what the hell am I talking about? I don't get paid for this. All right. Anyway, we'll see you guys next week.